to Beyond the Ring, a podcast that covers all things in the stock show industry from the informative to the insane, starring Ryan Rash,
Authenticity is your superpower,
and Dale Hummel.
The memories we make with our family are everything.
Now on with the show.
Welcome to Beyond the Ring. This is Dale Hummel, along with co-star Ryan Rash.
Hello.
Well, Ryan, I'm just home from American Royal, and I'd like to express a thank you to all that introduced themselves. And Ryan, they've had kind words for this podcast like never before.
They're about me, not about you.
I told them that they can disagree with you more, and it would be very positive. But in all seriousness, thank you to those that stopped by and were so positive on things. And it's shocking to me just the reach that this project has evolved into. So Ryan, I'm fully aware you have zero interest in what's going on internationally.
Oh God, here we go.
Until it bites you right in the ass, and then you will have an interest in it, I'm sure.
What's
Israel,
China?
no, we're going to Israel and the Middle East just for a moment to make sure.
I was the one that brought this up last week, and you didn't want to talk about it, but it's fine.
Well, we're recording Sunday, so a little bit early. Mm-hmm. But tonight, Sunday night, it appears as though Israel's ramping up for a major attack on Hamas-associated businesses, including financial institutions. And I think that it's gonna be fairly major. And I appreciate the fact they're trying to eliminate this terrorist group. And I understand it's controversial. I understand all these things, but it's shocking to me how they're standing alone to try to take care of the terrorist world and Iran, who is supporting 99.9% of the terrorist groups out there. They're doing this on their own. I don't think we're giving them any support other than defense with the Iron Dome of missiles coming in. But I appreciate their efforts. I appreciate the fact that they've got the intelligence to go after and hopefully isolate some of these leaders of the terrorist groups. And I think there's going to be a lot more that happen. I think you're going to see a retaliation for the October 1st attack on Israel from Iran in the very near future. And I understand, once again, that I don't know where our listeners stand on this, and it is a very complex problem that we're dealing with. But I cannot stress enough, we're going to be, once this drops, within a week, just over a week of the election. If you have not voted early, please make it a priority to get out there and vote. Please remind all those that are like-minded to do the same. It is critical. And I understand that Trump offends people with what he says. I understand that he can be boastful at times. I understand a lot of things. But the bottom line is, think about where our policy was when he was in office. Think about the direction that our country is going right now. And it's very clear. That is my plea. Ryan, you can bring in everything else.
You're talking about Israel and Iran and all this. They killed the Hamas leader, Sinwar. But I can remember back in COVID Rona days where Kim Jong-un went missing for several months and people thought that he was dead. And they were saying, well, we hope not, because his little sister will take over and she's worse. Well, Sinwar's younger brother is who's going to take over, and they say he's worse. So good for them for getting somebody out, but I don't know if that is going to help matters. But as far as the election goes, I agree with you. Get out and vote. And unlike you, I will not tell the people that don't agree with me not to vote, which you just said, the like-minded people. I think that's wrong. I think if you're an American, you should vote. But I will say I keep very close watch of it. And I send Dale a picture every morning. And for the past week, pretty much, according to the Real Clear Politics average, Trump is now ahead in every swing state. So that is good. It is trending his way. Obviously, the Democrats and Harris Walsh know this because they're desperate and doing desperate tactics. But I think if we all get out and vote, then I think we're going to be okay. It is much, much closer than the previous two elections, and he won one of them and almost won the other one. And some people still think he won that one. So, but
agreed completely. I guess just to point out, and there's so many instances I can bring out, but think about just how far out of whack our government is or has gotten to when the Department of Justice is suing states for enforcing the fact that voters should be citizens. This is insane. It's craziness. I don't even understand how we can question things such as that. Obama came out and is getting some blowback from chastising black men for voting on policy versus race. It's gone over the edge.
I know that you've been in Kansas City, but she's bringing out all these celebrities and Obama, whatever. But Lizzo was out for her, and I know we all care what Lizzo thinks, but her big line was, if you elect Kamala president, the whole country will be like Detroit. Isn't that what we all want? I was just like, Lord, lady.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah, but bad deal. But
I'm excited about our guest today, obviously, and I have many, many questions. Do you have? I'm trying to cut current events short. Is what I'm attempting.
I realize that. I do want to do top 10 in the BTRJLA for Senior Lambs. First, Hannah Hewitt, Texas. Second, Emily Ward, California. Third, Mackenzie Walters, Idaho. Fourth, Wyatt Nixon, Wisconsin. Next is Tay Hawkins of California, followed by Mason Calhoun of Oregon. Mitchell Haley of Colorado. Lane Marguerite of Oregon. Kenzie Brown of Texas. And 10th is Echo Bartles of Colorado.
Congratulations to all the top 10. Once again, each and every time I attend a show, I continue to receive in-person testimonials on the benefits of ShowFresh H2O. This company is based off of science and been strong supporters of this podcast and the junior livestock industry. If you have yet to try ShowFresh H2O, please do so. It will not disappoint. ShowFresh H2O can be purchased at your local farm store, show supply trailer, and at swampfox.com. Ryan, it's time for our topic. And backed by popular demand, Trending 2.0. And this week, we're honored to have Jimmy Williams with us to discuss cattle trends. Ryan, can you please introduce our guest?
I would be delighted to. I have known the legendary Mr. Jim Williams my entire life. And he is synonymous with all things livestock, not just in the show ring, but in the cattle industry. He is world renowned in terms of his Brahman genetics. They're in almost every country in the world. He has built a program second to none. He has judged every major show more times than almost anybody in the world, numerous state fairs. He is an icon in the cattle industry and the livestock world. And just coming up here in a couple of weeks, he will be the Saddle and Sirloin Portrait Hall of Fame honoree there in Louisville at the North American. And there is not a greater honor to be bestowed on anyone. And he is certainly worthy of it. And we greatly appreciate him taking his time to be out here. And on a personal note, I appreciate it very much, Mr. Williams. So thank you for being on here.
Thank you. And I'm honored to be here, Ryan and Dale.
Ryan, I'll let you start off.
Well, as we go into this, like we said, this is the fourth species that we've done. We saved the best for last with you, Mr. Williams, and cattle. The first question that I've asked everybody, our other guests in the other species, is what do you think is the biggest trend right now in the show ring in terms of cattle? Whether you like it or don't, what do you think is the biggest trend right now?
Well, I think one of the biggest trends is that people are wanting a lot of depth on these cattle, and there's lots of terms used by these young judges that to emphasize they want depth of body and spring a rib, and that's really become popular. That everybody wants that. Of course, we can go to extremes, which we've always done as judges, and we'll have them so deep ribbed and so bow sprung that looks like I've been on top of their back jumping up and down. And I'm not a real petite person. So I think in anything, we can't just go overboard on one area, but that seems to be like something, especially in the, I would say the British cattle and the continental cattle, the hair cattle, that would probably sure be the case. And I've heard lots of people say that. And, this cow is just so deep bodied and has so much spring of rib.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point that whether it's judges or breeders, we always go too far any direction. And that's kind of why we started this trend series. And it was very popular last year because there are times that in every species that we take things too far and people want to know what we think is going, what are good trends and what are not. And so that's kind of why we have these episodes. So, Dale, I know you have a list of questions.
I do.
So.
I wrote some down, Jimmy, because I tend to get distracted and forgetful sometimes. So I have a list this time. As a breeder and exhibitor on both the cattle and goat side of things, Jimmy, in order to win at the highest level right now, it seems like breeders are swinging for that home run, breeding extreme pieces together that may have some issues with them to get that one anomaly to get the job done, when 90% of the rest of the offspring born are going to have those issues and they just don't work. So I've witnessed your success over the years in that you take a little different approach to breeding, I think, than that. Can you explain that to us just a little bit?
Well, I can. I do like rapid generation turnover, and we've always tried to identify those good cattle that we think are going to be, real productive type cows and take us where we want to go. We've never flushed a cow that we at least haven't had at least one calf out of her to see if she even has a good milk production, if she stays sound, and if she stays in good condition. So you can't. It's best to stay. I'd say we are cattle at our ranch. We've had cattle that are a little bit over the average size frame cow, but that we've tried to stay pretty close to the middle of the road. And what we've found that's very, very dangerous is particularly on if you keep a herd sire out of a cow that says she's had 5 or 6 very mediocre ones, and then all of a sudden, boom, she hits this one that's an exceptional young bull. We've found time and time again those cattle never breed true because he was just an accident or a freak or one of those type things. And it's hard to get that predictability. And what, as a seed stock producer, what we have to have is uniformity, and we have to have a large portion of our calf crop. It's our only living. Everything here on V8 Ranch is paid for with a cow. So we can't afford to have one great one and discard 80% of them, or just have to sell them for, lower prices. We have to stay on that plane where these cattle are going to be good bulls that we can sell for commercial bulls or breeding bulls, and certainly the females, that are productive type females. So you don't, you need to take I say we need to take a rifle approach when you breed these cattle to give it some thought and not just a shotgun where here and there and this trend is popular, because I've always felt if you chase trends, you'll always be behind, because when you finally catch up in this purebred business, regardless of species, the trend's going to change a little bit. But if you'll stay on that middle ground and have cows that can take you in whatever direction you need to go, that's where we've been successful. And I've always said the magic's in the cows. Everybody wants to get on the male side, but you better watch the bottom side of that pedigree real close, because that's where your strength will be.
I can remember you saying the magic's in the cows my whole life. And so that's something that I think you coined that phrase. And I can remember from when I was little on hearing you say that to not just me, but many, many, many people. So there's some truth in that for sure.
Sure.
Absolutely. And Jimmy, to kind of follow that back up, and we hear a lot of judges, young and old right now, talking about skeletal integrity and skeletal build. And I guess when I look at it, just effortless movement from point A to B is kind of where I want to be. And we would like to think that helps in longevity and keeping that cow around a while. My issue that I sometimes see is I hear judges talking about it, but then I don't necessarily see it matching the animals, if that makes sense. Is this a priority? Is it going to change? Are we going to get better at this?
There's more people talking about it than actually selecting for that, Dale. It's just you hear, these cattle, they're really nice and functionally sound and move and travel well. And I'm looking sometimes at these cattle and say, well, that animal's short strided, breaks in its top, steep shouldered, has some trouble, motion. And I'd say now, and I probably tell this from people that come to the ranch and buy cattle, there's a lot of people just don't know structure anymore. It sounds good and they talk about it, but I'll be looking and I'll think, golly, what the hell's going on here, Because when I'm judging, I stand right at that gate, and usually I'm watching them walk in, and I'm making my decisions pretty quick there. But if it can't walk and travel, you got problems. If you don't have them built from the ground up, and old Judge Nick Overpack from Indiana, I've heard him say that when I was a young person. You got to build them from the ground up, and that's never been truer than it is today. Especially, we're giving these cattle and all these species. There's every kind of additive there is in the world out there, and you need to add this and add that, and before you know it, you've got your ration out of balance. And a lot of that high protein, those additives, can also give you foot problems. I'm convinced of that because historically, the cattle that we've shown are the ones that when we put them out in the pasture, a lot of times, they're the ones not quite as sound as they used to be because we've trimmed their feet so many times and we've trimmed them too close and the grinder's been too hot. And that's why when you're trimming their feet and you hit that nerve, they'll just want to tear that table down. And you can imagine what that does for longevity on cattle. But nobody much thinks of that. But I've noticed that just with observation. The cattle that will always be a little bit tender stuff, usually when they get in production, will be those show cattle because of that foot grinder and those high enriched feeds that we feed them and those high protein supplements.
Do you think there's possibly because we see this, everybody looks at skeletal build and movement and soundness a little bit different, and I take it probably to an extreme, and Ryan will make fun of me for it, that just getting from point A to B with the least amount of effort is kind of where I'm at. However, that doesn't always go into what maybe we train some of these kids in terms of everything being perfectly straight in their lines when that goes against maybe how some of these joints should be formed. Maybe we don't need that perfectly level hip, or at least don't need those pins set above the hooks. And maybe we need some set to that hind leg and some flexibility there, where a lot of times we have this image of these straight lines. And I'm afraid sometimes that's perceived more as a correct skeletal build than the true function.
I think you're right on point there. On these, I talk about the females a lot, but on these females, we're wanting these cattle that are, bow sprung and have that lot of capacity and volume. But usually they're going to be a little bit soft topped, and that hip is going to be inverted up, like you said, maybe the opposite angle that it needs to be. And I'll tell you this from breeding cattle, those are those ones when you get ready to breed them, you've got that vulva tilted up too far up in their spine. You have to stand on the bottom rail of the fence to get the catheter in there to breed the cow because we wanted her so straight, or even have sacrificed correct hip placement. And to breed those cows or to calve those cows, that's some problems a lot of people don't think about. But if you don't have good structure, you can have the best cow in the world, but or best goat, or you name it, you just won't have longevity and durability because those cattle have to survive out in the pasture and breed and have longevity to them. And that's if you don't, I noticed when I first started judging steer shows a long time ago, they had so many cattle that would have hindquarters that were just tremendously powerful. And then when you'd ask them to walk, you'd be so disappointed. And I used to tell people when you're looking at, and I don't sell steers, so this is no conflict of interest. But don't just, when they want to have them tied up, when you come look, they've got their head jacked up and they're all blowed, and that rear end looks like a Montana mare back there. Ask them to untie the calf and let you watch it walk and lead to see, because we've selected so much for big hindquartered cattle too, that we just don't have enough movement to them. They're going to be very steep off those hocks and just can't travel. And I'm a guy that I'll separate them pretty quick on structural soundness because I practice it every day, at the ranch. I see it every day.
I think one of the most important things that y'all both said here in the last couple minutes is, I think it is a trend right now that more judges talk about structure on their reasons, but I think all of us agree that while they talk a good game, it is not evident in their placings, and what they say does not match the animals out there. And I think that is an issue, and I don't know how we get that trend to be better. All of us judge and all that, and we've all been involved in the judging college program over the years and stuff like that, but there's got to come a point where if we're going to talk about it on the mic, it's at least got to be somewhat match up with the animal that you're talking about. And what I tell people all the time, because Dale knows, and I know Mr. Williams will remember from back when I was a little kid, if I wasn't at the box, I was at the show ring watching the show. And I listen. And I know everybody doesn't listen, but I do listen. And there are lots of us that do listen. But when I'm watching a show, what I want to be able to do after 3 or 4 classes is to say, okay, this is where this judge's line is on structural correctness. He'll give up this to get this, or this is what he thinks is adequately sound, or, they've got to be perfect in their structure for this judge. I want to be able to tell where that person's line is. And I can't do that very often anymore. And I think that is a problem, because if somebody that watches can't tell where the judge is at, that just tells me that the judge may not know where they're at either.
Yeah, that he doesn't know he doesn't know. That's right. What that is. He doesn't know, and he doesn't know he doesn't know. But I agree with one thing. Even myself, and I'm 69 years old, I watch people that judge that I respect. And there's some top young judges that I've seen judge here lately. But I'm always learning. And when those great judges who were my heroes when I was a little young whippersnapper, man, I would be on that fence, leaning up on that rail like at Fort Worth, and when we used to show in the old barn where it had the green walls and it ran uphill, and you had some wonderful spots you could get that you just couldn't be beat, or you could get in the hole if you weren't watching what we were doing. But I would listen and use different terminologies that they used, or maybe another way to say something instead of, if you judge all day a steer show, your reasons can get pretty redundant. So you try to think of something to say that's the same thing, just a little bit twist to it. But I would say watch other judges, the ones who you really have respect. But what you said about trying to get to gauge on it, sometimes you can watch 3 or 4 classes, and I always do that on a person I've never seen judge, particularly if we show in cattle. I want to see where they're at. You gave a great description. See where that guy's point is. How far is he going to tolerate this or that? And sometimes you will have a really great one that you would like to see travel a little bit nicer, or maybe have a little bit more fluid movement or a little bit more bend at its hocks. But it's still the best one out there. And you just have to say, hey, this is a steer that's outstanding, travel, good, strong top. Like to see him cover his tracks just a little bit. I'd like to see him, because if you give that grant that, hey, I've seen it, I see what the problem is, but it's still one of the best ones out here, people will accept that. But if you get on that mic and somebody's really watching, like yourself, say, or Dale, and I blurt out, boy, this steer really, really nice, and I like the way he travels, you're going to lead each other and say, if Jim likes how he travels, I'd hate to see one that travels bad. So if he doesn't travel good, just say, hey, he needs a little help there, but he's still superior everywhere else. But you just have to be selective what you do, and it is some give and take. But I agree with watching judges that you have a lot of respect for. And, if you're judging, you don't have to know if you're doing a good job or not. If you're doing a good job, your phone keeps ringing. If your phone stops ringing, you're not doing a good job judging, and everybody finds out about it, So that's the best thing I say. If you would say, when I was a young guy, I'd think, do you think I did that all right? And if your phone rings about 2 weeks after that, then say, hey, I saw you judge such and such. We'd like to have you. You're doing a good job. If nobody's calling you and people are calling saying, hey, try to get me a judging job, you're not doing a good job judging. I'll tell you.
That is a very valid point there, sir. And, the one thing, I know Dale's got a lot to get through, but I want to comment on something that you said. You have to judge what's brought to you. And just like you said, the very best animal in the class may not be perfect in this one area. And a lot of times, maybe they are a little short-strided, or maybe not as effortless in the term Dale uses in the way they move. But like you said, if you will just say that and say, this one wins because of this, this, and this. Now, I admit he's not perfect or she's not perfect. Here, there's nothing wrong with saying that. There is no perfect animal in the world. But that is fine. But them just saying, oh, this one's great everywhere, and oh, so sound, or just not even mentioning it at all, just not talking structure on them all, that drives me crazy. And so I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yep, that's right.
I love it. And Jimmy, I've got a lot of different things to ask here, but one thing that we touched on, or it's been a hot topic as of recently within the cattle show ring, is maturity. And it seems as though in the market side across species, to get the kind of feature and bone and density that the ruggedness that we want, that naturally comes with older animals. And we're showing some of these market animals, including some goats that we're raising, extremely old across the board. And if people try to tell you that they're young and youthful and so forth that are winning, they're probably telling a fib. It seems because of that, we are breeding for older animals for targeted shows. Maturity seems to be a huge advantage right now within reason, not within reason, but within the market arena. We're seeing some questions of age on the breeding cattle side, and obviously the other species as well. It's a battle. I don't know if there's a solution to it, but I can assure you on the market side, because of the maturity advantages, we've completely tossed growth and performance out the window. It almost doesn't exist at that point. I don't know about that on the breeding side. Obviously, we still want cattle that perform and do well, but maybe the moving of birth dates and not using actual birth dates is the easier route to get to that end. I have no idea how to approach this. I know different breed associations have looked at it. I guess we'd just love some of your insight on it. And is there a solution?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because before you came on, Dale, Ryan and I touched on that just a little bit, but it's a real hot topic now. I say I'm not on Facebook, but my wife says I look at it every day because I look on hers. So I guess I am guilty of that. But you can't, any show that's been held now, regardless of the breed, they're going to talk about this maturity, or the old-fashioned people would say just overaging. But what kills you is used to, and I've been showing these cattle since I was at the ranch professionally. I guess I would say since about 1970. 4 or 5. It's a long time. But used to, they would have one that was not as good, and the only hope they would have to be competitive, they would change the birth date. Now, this is where it's tough to control a little bit, because say you have one that's that's a real good calf, but is a little bit small, and he's born, it's a March 1st heifer, I'm going to say, and you think, man, this heifer's really good. She's thick and got some muscle to her. She's just not big enough. Let's see, I think today I'll call her a May the 15th, but maybe next week, before I actually fill out the registration papers, she might be June the 15th. And if I get brave, drift her down there to about August into that summer class. But what happens, you've got a real good animal that it has high quality to it, just a little bit smaller kind. But you move her about 2 or 3 months, and boy, she's a powerhouse, because those other heifers in that class will look like they're sucking calves. They'll be so green and fresh looking. And boy, this one, she'll be the same height. But I think the key word, what you said, was maturity, not the frame or the growth, just maturity. And you have one of those type animals, bull or female or steer, and they've got that extra maturity on them where they start putting on muscle and condition. And I tell you, they're hard to handle, and they're hard to get beat. Now, in the breeding cattle, they can come back the next year, and you'll say, "Where's that heifer that was class winner at the national?" Oh, we decided not to show her, and all those type of excuses. Nobody's going to not show one that was calf champion at the national show the next year, unless she just didn't grow, unless she just looks little out there. But now in that steer deal where you got that one crack, say at Kansas City or Louisville or Denver or Houston, all those majors, it's hard to overcome, Dale. What you said is really, really hard to overcome, And you'll see some of those steers now that you can tell, boy, that steer's old now. Wonder what that calf, wonder how old he is. So it's a problem in all breeds, and it's hard to combat.
It is, and I'm going to speak, and I try to be clear on this. And Ryan likes to give me a hard time. When we got into the show goat world on the market weather side of it, I threw all practicality out the window, and I don't hide it whatsoever. We have to, for us to sell goats that go out and win at the national level, we're breeding for things that Mother Nature would say, no, this isn't how a goat should be. And I don't like even admitting that. So on the other side of it, we got back into the cattle business on the Angus side. And I go the opposite direction. I go with where my heart is and belief is, and making that longevity and soundness and all those things a huge priority. And I think it's good, because to me, the cattle side, we still have that chance of keeping it, and you've done it better than anybody, of keeping the real world somewhat connected to the show ring, where I can assure you the other species, and Ryan and I have talked about it, there is a complete and total disconnect. It's gone. Do I think we can continue to make good show cattle that also function in the real world? Jimmy, you've done it. You do it every day, but it's hard. It really is, because of that separation of what we think a show creature should look like relative to one that functions in the real world. And we are showing, and I'm going to take it back to the goat side on that maturity and that density. Right now, I don't know that there's a fix for it. So I'm going to go back, and this will lead into the next question. Fortunately, we've got so many juniors and young exhibitors involved in showing market species and breeding animals as well. But the experience they're getting from the junior livestock industry, irregardless of what that type or kind is in the show ring, is invaluable. Their work ethic, their responsibility, everything that we put into it. And Jimmy, you talked about showing professionally since the mid 70s. I can think back to when across species open shows were still really, really, really big. When the junior numbers weren't maybe very strong, but the junior thing is kind of taken over, and it's really grown in numbers, and we're getting so much good, and we're raising kids like they need to be raised. With that said, give me a little bit of perspective from when you can remember getting into this, and what the show ring was like then in terms of juniors versus open show, or just the big picture, kind of from a mile high to what it's evolved into.
That's a great observation. It's evolved to a whole different level now. When I was showing as a young person out of college showing, it was all the older fitters. I mean, it was like LaRue Douglas, Dave Sagabill, Nick Overpeck, you Johnny Hook. I mean, some of those guys are still walking around like me with stove up legs, but it was real competitive. Now your open show is almost all junior shows, and some of the most competitive animals being shown in the cattle, the juniors own them. So it's changed, 100% on that. Those junior kids are, I can remember when we got into Shorthorns, and I can remember Ryan showing too the Simmentals when he was in that as a young person. It was rare when we bought those heifers, and Rachel and Catherine showed them. They said, "Now you're going to show them at Louisville. You're going to show those, Jim." I said, "Nope, no, I'm not going to show them. The girls are going to show them." And they're like, "Oh, come on!" I mean, some of the people I bought those heifers from, they said, "Surely you're not going to let those two little girls show those heifers at Louisville, are you?" I said, "Yeah, they're going to show them. They'll be fine." And but that started something. I mean, I'm not getting credit. Don't not get carried away here, but I did lead some of the trend on that, because I said, no, they're their heifers, and they're going to show them in the junior show, and they're going to show them in the open show. And then it got to be more and more people did it. And now, even at the Brahman shows, and certainly at the open Shorthorn shows, which I'm very familiar with, the tush hog heifers are those young kids who you said who have those heifers and put in the work on them, and they're competitive. I tell you, some of the best heifers being shown will be shown by these kids, and they bring, they sell for a lot of money. And that doesn't mean they're always going to win. In fact, sometimes they won't. But that whole perspective, the kids now are so involved, and that's good. And I tell you, there's a lot of good showmen out there showing too amongst those young kids. Probably not quite as there used to be because they're not apt to watch and learn, like Ryan said, or like I've said, where I used to watch those old judges and hang on every word, how they handled themselves and how they did things. But some of these young ones think they got it, they're the best in the world. But those ones who watch those good showmen and learn what's going on and are picking your brain after you judge and ask, what can I do to help myself? What do you think I should have done, Mr. Williams? I'd say, well, you know, you don't want to stay out and get in that hole like you did with that good steer and break his top down. Oh, I didn't even notice that. But see, you got to be out there and be watching where that hole is 5 classes before you bust out there. But no, it's changed. The junior program is most of our calves that we'll sell in our internet sale go to juniors and breeders wanting one, you know, top donor cow. It's a whole different perspective out there now showing.
That's interesting. Where if we think back many years ago, if you had that junior like one of your daughters out there in that open show, that was the anomaly. Where now it's completely flipped. That if we have somebody like yourself dragging one out there in that open show and not a young person, you're the one that stands out.
That's right.
I can remember, and I brought this up on the podcast before, Mr. Jim. I can remember when Rachel, Catherine, and I would go to Kansas City, Louisville, Denver, all this other stuff. We would be one of the only ones that showed in the open show as kids. And I can remember a specific instance at Kansas City when John Ben came to you and said, Ryan really wants to show these Simmentals in the open show. He came to you and Jim Bloomberg, and y'all were both like, just let him do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, all these breeders are telling me that it's going to be bad on the, and I remember that like it was yesterday. Both of y'all told him, you just let him go out there and do it. But there were not very many. And now, like you said, it is completely and totally different. It is just the opposite now. But yeah, I do remember that. And funny that got brought up because I brought that up on this podcast in previous episodes.
Yeah, John Ben said, hey, Jim, I want to ask you something. I didn't know what he's going to ask me. He said, hey, I'm getting all this advice. What about, we like these heifers and Ryan likes to show them, but some of these breeders we got these heifers from are, I don't know, we need to let so-and-so show it and stuff. And I said, no, let Ryan show them. He can show good. He knows the heifers, and the heifers know him, which is very important. In the youth junior program, you've got to know, the calves have to know the kid showing them, not a custom fitter or the mom or dad. And he said, you think so? And Jim Bloomberg, well, he and I think we drink out of the same cup. You know, he might drink a little bit stronger drink than I would. But anyway, we think alike. And I know Jim would have said, oh, no, let Ryan show him. But I remember that because the trend was you could show him in the junior show, but don't go in that open show ring, you know, no way.
Jim, I'm gonna jump in here on another one. So just looking at your program from a distance, you're obviously producing cattle that get along extremely well in the show ring. You're producing and merchandise cattle around the world that are going to farms and operations to get out and perform and make cattle better, not necessarily in other countries for the show ring, but just to make genetics better. I'm not saying there aren't others doing that, but they're very few. And I think that the compliment to you that you're able to do both is impressive. It's hard for me to even wrap my head around. And I guess the point that I want to make that it can be done. It isn't easy. There is no shortcut in it, but it can be done. And I think that comes back to a statement you made previous. Rather than chasing these trends, maybe we need to stay a little more middle of the road and just make cattle good. And that trend will come back and swing by many, many times. Or you're maybe one generation if somebody wants to tweak it just a little bit one way or the other. But if we stick to that base, we're probably gonna be ahead of the game more times than not. Is there any value to that?
No, there's great value to that because quality never goes out of style. Quality is always going to be the number one thing at the forefront. Breeding cattle or different species, first of all, you have to have quality, and you can't misrepresent things. Where things get what we've had sold cattle all my life, and I'm a cattle person that if you come here, you're going to deal with Jim Williams 99% of the time. But you can't misrepresent things. I mean, you can go back and look at all these. I've never said, hey, this heifer's going to be in a lot of pictures. This heifer's going to win a lot of buckles and banners. I've never said that. I say she's going to be a good cow. I've got 4 generations of donor cows on her. She's going to always give you a look because and I give you a chance. The saddest feeling in the world for a junior is to load a heifer or a steer or a goat in that trailer and know they don't have a Chinaman chance to win that show or to win that class. And that's a terrible feeling. And I mean, some people, I always liked it. And Billy Rash and I talked about this before, that when they were showing all these cattle in Texas with hair on them, you could outwork a lot of kids and buy you a good pattern steer and work with him and clip him and learn how to fit him and have a chance to beat some of those. Then when they went to slick shearing, boy, it was whole different change too, because those really good ones that were just really good and you could shave them off if you want to, they were hard to beat because not everybody could get those steers. They cost a lot of money and the pickings were slim. But in the old days, just don't let anybody outwork you. You could take somebody he might not have the fanciest trailer or the best truck or the fanciest show barn, but when that steer came out of that trailer, you had a chance to win because, you could outwork them and have that steer good shaped, start off with a good balanced steer that had quality. But if you start out with something without quality as the foundation, you're fighting a tough battle. You might win some little goat ropings, but you better have one that's got good quality to him to start with, or when you get to those majors, you're going to get blowed out. That's what's going to happen. All species.
And Jimmy, I've seen, and on this, I'm gonna take it from a couple different directions. We're gonna kind of go back to maybe selling some of these club goats or wethers as an example, especially in online sales. It appears as though a lot of the buyers are swinging for what they think that next trend is, those extremes, that great big hip or that freak neck or whatever it may be, or that extra leg hair, all those things, but sometimes sacrificing in a skeletal build or there's an issue that comes with it. And I feel for them because a lot of those animals just aren't going to mature to that perfect show backdrop picture that they've got in their mind. And I'm with you. That's a hard feeling. If they put that time and effort into that animal and they load up to go to a show, they need to think they have a chance to whatever that goal may be. Let's say we're going to make the sale at Houston, or let's say we're trying to win a division. Everybody has different goals, and we need to be realistic to that. And I think as a breeder, sometimes I get in a mindset that every goat needs to have a chance to win a national show, and that's craziness. That doesn't happen. In online sales, you'll read descriptions, and every darn animal on there is going to win a national show somewhere, and that's probably not right either to go to that point and maybe mislead just a little bit. But I appreciate those comments that we need these youth need to be involved, and if they're going to put that work and effort in, let's do our best to match them up with an animal that stays within budget, that can truly meet whatever that goal might be. And that's a balancing act, but it is appreciated.
But you can, if you go to breeders, regardless. Now, I don't know about the goats. I'm strictly a cow person. But you tell them, look, I've got X amount of dollars to spend. I want you to try to help me here. We're going to maybe try to crawl before we try to win a 100-yard dash. What's a good project? What's a good goat for me to start with? Or what's a good heifer? Most of the time, those breeders are going to tell you, and I'll tell them a lot of times. I'll say, "Look, let's don't try to buy a $30,000 heifer. Why don't you start out with a good, solid heifer that every time you show her, you've got a chance to do pretty good." I didn't say win the class, those type things, but you show her at your county fair, some of the jackpot shows, you're going to have a good chance to have a good experience, and let's do that. And then we'll try to, if you like it and your son or daughter likes it, you want to move up just a little bit, you can. But go slow, but just get you a good solid one that you might not have a chance to be grand champion, but you've got a chance to be competitive in the class. And some people they're very, very happy to be in the top third of the class at the Houston Livestock Show with, 40 head of heifers in there. If they're number 12, some people are like, hey, we sure had a good show. We really enjoyed it. We learned a lot. Then you have some, if they stand second out of 40, they're saying, man, I don't know what happened to me today. And I'm thinking, man, second out of 40 at Houston, that be proud of yourself. That's pretty good, because if you're in that top 5, regardless of what breed you're showing or species, you've got something you can be proud of, young lady or young man. And it's a tough deal. And talking about how trends change, I haven't gone as much lately to these shows because I had these knee operations. But these hogs now, showing them with all that hair on them and all that stuff. I mean, that's, for me to even look at those, that's a little bit different than it was 2 years ago. That's a trend that all these hogs are showing with this hair all over them. And they'll be talking more about hair, and of course, some of these goats and sheep got leg hair on them that's tremendous. So different trends come. You have to keep up with the trends to be competitive. But sometimes the tail is wagging the dog instead of the dog wagging the tail, and you just have to realize that for what it is.
That is very, very true on the tail wagging. And like you said, there are, we see the trends in the hogs move more rapidly than others because they can have multiple litters a year. They have more pigs per litter, all this other stuff. But the trends change in every single species. It just takes cattle maybe a little longer. I've asked this of every guest that we've had on here, and I'm going to ask you, and I'm sure Dale's got more questions, but since you brought this part up, none of us have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to ask you, and I didn't ask anybody else, what the next big trend will be, because I think that's a loaded question that nobody can really answer. But what I have asked them is, if you could pick a trend, or you could say, this is where I think we should start moving or heading, and what would it be in the cattle industry? Where would you like to see it go?
I would like to, it's what something that y'all started off the program, more structural correctness and more cattle that once you take the show halter off of them, can have some longevity and function out in the pasture. I think that's where we need to go. You're going to there's so many different shows now and different judges. Some don't, we've talked about this, place a lot of emphasis on structural soundness. And I've actually heard steer judges, not too many good ones, but I've heard some that have said this. Well, these steers are market animals and they're going to be slaughtered and stuff. But you better remember this. Every one of those steers out there has got some heifer mates to them too. And they're going to be out in that pasture and trying to raise some future show steers for you. So you got to have that durability and cattle that can maintain themselves, regardless even of species. I would say we got to emphasize more structural correctness and soundness, and select judges who place a great deal of emphasis on that. That we just have to get back to the real world.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Jimmy. And I've just got one last question that this kind of leads into. And I talked about how you're able to make show cattle, how you're able to sell internationally to just people wanting to make better performance cattle that can get out there and work in the real world and all the above. And it's a little bit unusual. And Ryan and I debate and discuss the real world versus the show ring, and can we tie the two together in any manner? And we openly admit that within the other species, the disconnect is there. It's real. There is little connection between the real world and the show ring. I still have that hope that we can hold on to it in the cattle ring. And I want to use something maybe as an example. It appears as though, and Ryan probably can address this better, Jimmy, than you or I possibly, but we're seeing steers in the show ring now. I'm going to say natural weight, not declared weight, but natural weights at 1,500 plus. Mm-hmm. And people are talking about how the packers are accepting those big of cattle so we can do it in the show ring. Is that another indication that maybe there is still just a little bit of that attachment?
Now, what do you mean by attachment?
That the real world still has some impact on the show ring.
Oh, yeah. This is something that we battle, and I want to get back to what you're saying, too. I've noticed that that these steers are showing bigger. It got to a point. It was the race where we used, I think that one steer at Denver was 71 inches one year. I'm not saying the judge he used them, but they had a steer symposium, and man, they were getting on him about that. And he said, at the time, that's the kind that they're using. But I'm tired of y'all keep flashing that picture up there of me standing behind that steer that's like 70 inches tall or some unbelievable height. But, we are inching those steers back up and up. But I'll say this, it's harder to get a good big one than it is a good little one. It's easy to come down the stairs. If you need to downsize, you could. I got bulls that in the semen tank that are 30 or 40 years old. I guarantee you breed some of those bulls that you can downsize quick now. You can go down the stairs quick. But to have a good one, again, that quality to go up the stairs and still maintain quality, that's a harder animal to breed. But I'll say this, you hear a lot of people say, well, you've got show cattle, then you've got real world cattle, commercial cattle. But at our ranch, and also my cousin's ranch, we've shown cattle forever at our ranches. We also sell as many commercial bulls than anybody. So I don't have in my program 2 breeding programs going on. It's the same one, but I'll have some of those that will breed. Well, really, one of the big things I emphasize at our ranch is light birth weight. Because if a person buys a bull and he's got trouble calving, he's not coming back. He doesn't. If a cow's having calving trouble, he doesn't want to know if it's a score for a easy pull, hard pull, or no pull. They want to pull because they want that calf out of there. But if you have too many of those, you won't be selling consistently commercial bulls. But we run commercial cows ourselves, so we don't have a different where we say, oh, we're breeding this for the commercial guy and this for the show person. We try to breed cattle that will fit the commercial industry that maybe have a little bit more growth to them that can be competitive in the show ring. Because we can't afford, when we have these bulls that we get ready to sell, and we have to sell them because that feed cost is high. And like I said, I'd sure like an oil well at this ranch, but we haven't had one yet. But it'd be nice to have one. I could sure breed probably better cattle overnight all of a sudden. But we don't have 2 breeding programs. We're still thinking commercial guy all along, and we'll be selling commercial bulls out of that Sloan bull and stuff too that maybe are a little bit smaller frame, but we know are going to do good in different areas. And in the purebred business with Brahmans, now when you send those bulls to Latin America, a lot of those bulls will be bigger bulls because they've got all that forage down there, and it rains every day, and they've got cheap labor. But they want something that weighs heavy. But up here, you can't be raising a bunch of those high maintenance bulls and putting them out in a commercial herd, or you're not going to have any bull buyers. They're not going to come back. But we try to balance that show cattle with commercial cattle, and I think we've done a good job, along that too.
Excellent. I think that lends itself to something we talked about earlier, that there's not one female, one bull that's going to fit every environment. It just doesn't. And sometimes we forget about that in the show rig, and we think this one animal, even on the market side, there's different packing plants that are putting different premiums on different parameters, whether it's yield grade, quality grade, carcass weight window, whatever that may be. And right. we do have to realize that each judge that goes out there, their past experiences, how they were raised, the operation they may have at home, or what they've been brought up with is going to influence the type of animal they like. And there's nothing wrong with that, because different animals fit into different environments, and that is a healthy thing. So I guess I encourage people to open their mind up that if that judge can go out there, rather than saying, is he dead on to where we think that trend is, but rather, are they describing those animals and true to what they have experienced and the kind of cattle that maybe work for them? There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe we need to do just a little more research on what is that judge going to use? Where is their base, and what have they done in the past? And as long as they're consistent, I think that Texas has done a better job than most, because the majors exhibitors down there aren't as concerned about what type of animal that person's going to judge, but rather they understand and know what to bring them. And we're slow to get to that in the North. So that's interesting to me. And that's something we've got to be a little more open-minded to.
That's a great point, because see, you have, and there's a good judge, and Ryan kind of touched on this. if he picks a certain type and he says this is the type I like, and in his descriptions he picks those cattle and he's consistently picking those cattle. And every once in a while, he might have to pick one a little bit bigger than he'd like, or maybe a little bit smaller, but it still fits that type in quotation marks. And he can tell you why he's doing it. To me, that's a great judge. I might not agree with him as far as the type. My dad always said that's why they make chocolate and vanilla and strawberry ice cream. It's all ice cream, but people like different flavors. And there's nothing wrong with that in the cattle business, but you have to know certain judges are going to like a certain type cattle. And you need to know those judges. Are they going to place a lot of emphasis on feet and legs and movement, or they're not going to worry about that at all? They want one with the biggest hind quarter you've got on it and hip and depth, but they're not going to place a lot of emphasis on a cattle that maybe don't travel quite as well. So, but if you know before you go that he's going to place emphasis on this, don't send some that you're going to get irritated if they get beat with, because going in that isn't the type that he likes. And I heard Mark McClintock say this is he was judging when we had shorthorn cattle, and he didn't like those club calf heifers too much, but you would have some people that would just jump all over them. And we had one called Snow Bunny that Catherine showed. Ryan Rash would know her well. He showed her.
Yes, sir. Yep.
But we had Snow Bunny. She was a double stuff, and she had hair 3 inches long. And if you had one of those steer judge oriented type person, they wasn't going to beat Snow Bunny. And I didn't really like her that much, but you had to have one at that show if you were showing all these jackpot shows, because you would run into those about half the time, and you could whip old Snow Bunny out there and she wasn't going to get beat, But if you had somebody who was more into breeding cattle, don't take Snow Bunny, because you're going to get mad on the way home because you got beat. But you knew when you loaded it, he's not going to like that heifer. You know what the heifer I'm talking about, Ryan.
Oh yeah, sir. Yeah, and, I remember her well.
So you need to kind of. I understand new people don't know the judges and stuff, but they can ask the breeders they bought from and stuff. And sometimes I've told people that wanted to go to a certain judge, and I'd say, you bought that heifer for a lot of money, but he's not going to like that heifer. I'm just going to tell you, he's not going to be too wild about that heifer. Why don't you take such and such heifer? That's the one I would take. But Mr. Williams, this other heifer, I said, yeah, but this guy, he's not going to worry about all that other stuff. He's not going to like her. I'm just going to tell you, for whatever reason it would be, So
excellent. And I think we have more and more people that are starting to understand that better. And it's interesting to me how just geographically across the country that it's evolved quicker in the South maybe than it has up here. And I think it's because you have more variety. You have 5 majors. You can decide and pick and choose what to take, what animal to, and so forth. Just more shows allows that to happen, where a lot of times here, let's say in Illinois, we've got state fair, and within our state, that's pretty much it. And we're going to have to show to whichever one shows up there. And it makes it difficult because everybody does have different opinions, and that's how the world works. And that's a great thing.
So, and Dale, you talk about the state fair in Illinois. That's one of my favorite places in the world to judge there. Illinois State Fair, Iowa. There's a bunch of them. I judge steers at all those shows. But like in especially, now I don't know, this might have changed, but used to at Illinois, you had these 400 steers show, and there would be some good ones, and it would be standing room only in there watching judge that show, and they'd be so close to you when you're judging, you could hear them breathing almost, or if they were smoking a cigarette, you'd have to get away because you're just burning your nose or your eyes. But you talk about intense judging, because they were going to sell the champion and reserve, and then they were going to sell the champion Land of Lincoln and the champion reserve champion Land of Lincoln. And the other 396 were going home with nothing, zero. So, boy, that puts a lot of pressure on you. When you go to those shows, you better be paying attention and don't be playing games and call it like you see it, which you need to do that every show anyway. But, that's pressure on those people up at those state fairs. Now I think they've helped them a little bit where you can sell more of them. But used to, that was all you could sell. Isn't that right?
No, and it's still that way, Jimmy. And it's intense at times, and the pressure is felt on every level, including you standing out there as a judge. It's just there.
You better have your best day that day. You better be paying attention, judging, and paying attention what you're saying when you click that microphone. Because those Illinois people and those people up there that maybe have shown those steers on borrowed money and stuff, and maybe the corn crop hadn't been as good that year, you better call it like you see it and give good, valid reasons, because they're listening, and they will talk to you after the show too.
And when those emotions get put into things, it is absolutely what you're talking about. And with that, I can remember the last time I believe you were at Illinois. I believe it's a steer show that I was watching, and I've seen you sort many events. And I want to thank you just from the standpoint that you make it a positive experience for every youth that enters that ring. And if we don't do that as judges, if we don't take the time to do that, we probably shouldn't accept those shows, because the bottom line is these kids better have a positive experience. We better encourage them to continue to do what they're doing each and every day, because I can assure you, my kids are going to a very small local public school, and I'm familiar with a lot of kids across the country that we work with. What we're giving them in this industry is not happening outside of it like I wish it would. This is our sanctuary.
That's right. I would say one thing, and this is off the topic maybe, but for young judges, and they sure want to judge and do a good job. Nobody wants to judge and do a bad job. But sometimes these young judges are too quick to criticize and want to find every fault in the animal and just tear them apart. And you don't need to. You need to say why you have to say why you have one first and one second and one third and fourth. But you don't have to give a 5-minute dissertation about he turns out on his left front foot. He's got a swelling in his right inside hock. You don't need to do all that, but try to end on a good, positive note. And I'll tell you, one time I was judging in Louisiana the steers, and everybody in Louisiana is Go Tigers, ALSU. And this little boy was showing a steer, and I tell you, that steer was terrible. And he stood last out of about 15. It wasn't like he's 38 in the class, but last is last, whether it's 2 or 15 or 56. And I was looking at him, and now you could tell he was doing the best job he could, but he just didn't have a good enough steer. But he was wearing a Texas A&M belt buckle at work at LSU at Shreveport. And I saw his mom and daddy over there, and that's probably the first steer they showed. They had their rubber boots on and everything. But when I was talking to that class, I said, I want everybody to pay attention here on this steer that's closing the class. I don't say that's last in the class. I say closing it. I would like to say I thought of that myself, but I heard Bill Couch say that one time, and I thought that's one of the best way to say when you're last, say the heifer that closes the class or completes the class. I said, but I want y'all, when y'all get out of here, this is probably the smartest little boy I've seen the whole show as far as intelligence. And they're all looking. I said, look at his belt buckle when he goes out that ring and see what it says. Had Texas A&M sitting on it, that he had bought at some feed store in Texas somewhere. And his mother came and gave me the biggest bear hug and had sweat all over and said, you made my son's day, Mr. Jim, because she said he was last. He had never done it. But when you said he was the smartest boy here because he got that Texas A&M belt buckle on, she said, I could hug your neck. I said, not too much harder because I need to breathe a little bit, ma'am. But you have to try to end on these kids a positive, uplifting thing. And I have a reputation now that you can get on there and dash some people about Jim Williams. Some like me and some say he never needs to judge a show. But I'm going to be pretty frank about good showmen and people who try hard. But I'm going to always try to say something to encourage that kid and tell them they got a lot of potential. Just keep trying. Just keep trying. And I think sometimes our young judges want to be so impressive to show what they know and tear up those cattle up and down. Can't do that. You got to have compassion for the kids. Compassion for the kids.
I love it, Jimmy. And it took you just a moment to say those few words about him being the smartest and how big of impact that had. We've got to think about that.
Yep, we do. Sometimes you have to look really, really hard there to find something good to say. But you try to find it on those that need a pat on the back. That need a good pat on the back.
Ryan, are you ready for your favorite, or do you have some more questions for Jimmy?
No, I just want to sum things up. And again, Mr. Williams is going to stay with us for question and answer. But I really do appreciate taking his time and giving us his expertise and knowledge. But, as this is the end of this trending series, as I asked Mr. Williams and I asked everybody else, what trend would you like to see, or where do you think this should go? And we've touched on this a lot, but myself personally, the trend that I would like to see, and this is towards judges, and y'all both talked about it, but I would like for them to be more accurate, as we've talked about, and be more positive, just as Mr. Williams talked about there. You do have to say what's wrong with the animal and why you placed the animal where you did, but you can always say something good. Even as Mr. Williams said, it is hard to find sometimes, but you can find something good to say about that kid or about that animal. And even more than that, if you really want, and I agree with what you both said, that judges want to do a good job. But if you really want to be respected and you want to continue to be a judge and continue to get bigger jobs or more important jobs or all this, you've got to be accurate in what you're saying and why you say it, because you may think that you're at some little Podunk County fair and nobody is listening to you. And I'm telling you now, with Facebook and live stream and all these other things, someone is going to hear what you say. And if it's not accurate and it's not true and it's not right, the one person that you may not want to hear you is going to. And even if they don't, someone's going to show that person, well, look what this Nimrod said here in this class. And you just got to be accurate, and you've got to quit sweeping stuff under the rug for your buddies. And I'm not going to get into politics and the show ring, because we'll be here for another hour and all this other stuff, but you've got to be accurate and you've got to be encouraging. And so that's kind of where I wanted to end this trending deal. That is what I hope the new trend comes. But as far as question and answer, we hope that Mr. Jim will stay with us as we go through this. And Mr. Jim, I'm going to tell you up front, I don't ever see these questions for the most part. Dale picks them out. So if we're in trouble, you can blame him. But I would like to thank Basic Animal Health for being the question and answer sponsor. Basic Animal Health has a revolutionary solution designed to keep your animals happy while traveling, and it's called Trailer Ride. Trailer Ride is originally designed to combat the stresses of travel, but it is a product that has shown to have unlimited uses. Trailer Ride starts by minimizing gastric distress and calming the animal for a safe and comfortable ride, but it also boosts the immune system, supports respiratory health, and contains electrolytes to keep your animals drinking and hydrated. If you want to try out Trailer Ride or any of the Basic Animal Health supplements that they have, please go to their website, www.basicanimalhealth.com. We appreciate the Leonard family, Leonard Truck and Trailer, and Basic Animal Health for being the question and answer sponsor.
Thank you, Basic Animal and Health. The first question comes from Jonathan. I am a show parent that has just returned from the American Royal. The record numbers and level of competition was great, but this has also caused huge issues with space for tack and availability of electrical outlets. This is a great problem to have because more numbers are showing up, but it also causes stress for families showing that do not go in days in advance to rope off space. Please give suggestions on how this can become less of an issue. Ryan, you want to do that one?
No, you were there. So
I was there, but can we agree that this isn't just the American Royal? This is kind of a problem at not all, but I'm going to say at least half of the larger shows.
I think space is an issue at every big show that you go to, whether it's your state fair, a big jackpot, or the major shows. Yes, I think it's an issue.
Well, I can attest to the Royal, and it was crowded. It was, almost to the point that I tend to get a little anxiety at times, and my chest was just a little bit tight, just thinking, how are we going to get all these families that we're trying to help out through and make sure they've got power and we can get them over to our area if needed and help them out. I commend the Royal for doing all they can. They set up some pins on the sheep and goat side down on the cattle area. I don't know with the space they have. I don't know that there's anything they can do. The good news is the American Royal has a new facility. The shell's already built. they're hopeful for next year, but for sure the following year they will move into that. And that I'm going to assume that they've allowed for more space and those things have happened. I hope so anyway. And that is the solution. Jonathan, I share your experience. We got there and squeezed into a very small space and made it work. And I think a lot of people did just that. There may have been some that took a little more space than they should, and that happens at every show, and it's just how it is. But I do appreciate the fact that there are some things happening, and maybe even when they move into a newer facility, and I've used the Arizona National as an example, and I have yet to hear anybody complain that you can purchase a fitting area, I believe a 10 by 10 fitting area ahead of time, and that's designated, and you don't have to worry about getting there and fighting for space, and you've got electrical capabilities in every fitting area. That takes a lot of stress away. And I told Ryan, I want to do a whole episode on this because for me, and I think for some families, that is the most stressful moment, is getting there in time to get moved in, that everything is going to be accommodated in terms of space and all that. And we need to make these shows as positive as we can and relieve some of that stress. Maybe it's just my nature that I get too concerned and let those things get to me. But Jonathan, I share your concerns, and I think the shows are always doing the best they can to try to accommodate. The second question comes from Joe. This one, Ryan and Jimmy, this one's kind of what we've already addressed just a little bit here on the podcast today, and that's why I pulled Joe's question in. His question regarding cattle trends episode, I'm excited to listen to it, and I would like to know if we're past making a freak long neck and the extreme depth of center body the major priority. Are we going to go on to less single trait selection in the show ring and more to a complete package? Jimmy, Ryan, this all you.
Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Well, yes, I think that's what we tried to say starting off. It's funny that Joe asked that question, because that was the first thing I said. We've got these cattle just so much volume and capacity in some single trait selection, But I think really throughout history, the judges try to do a good job and try to be forward thinking and things that we need to put more emphasis on and be more practical in the judging the cattle or the species that we're judging, the kind of ones we want that be productive and be a good example of the champion animal. So I think there's light at the end of the tunnel if we just don't continue to go down that. Dale made a good comment about how you're almost breeding these show goats, for the Superman goat or the super goat, and even at the expense of the rest of the goats not being exactly like you want. But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel on that. There's so many shows out there now and so many different judges, different ways. In the old days, you would have those judges that would judge. You'd have about 20 judges that would judge those major shows. And they had a pretty good type, and they were very confident in the time. There was differences among them, but you pretty well knew, Dr. Miles McKee is going to like one like this. Bill Jacob is going to like one like this. Harlan Ritchie's going to tend to like this kind. So, but now it's so many judges out there, it's a crapshoot. And it's hard to, especially if you're trying to hit that one animal that you think is going to be competitive and you put all your money in that one. I hope it's a light at the end of the tunnel. I would say that. I think that programs like this are very educational. And, people will call me a lot of times for these junior shows. Who do you recommend, Jim? Who would you think? You're getting old. But the list on my hand's getting smaller and smaller because you've got to have one that's going to be confident and judge good. And then he's going to be kind to those exhibitors. And there's certain ones that can be very competent, but they act like sometimes they'd rather be doing anything than judging a junior heifer show. You can't use that guy at a junior heifer show because you want somebody that's going to encourage the kids. But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. That was kind of a good rambling. Sum that up, Ryan Rash. You can handle
it. I agree with you. I think that, like I said earlier, I think all judges want to do a good job. I've never seen somebody that went into a ring that didn't want to do a good job. I think sometimes people get disappointed in the way things happen, and we're all competitive and we all want to win. But the single trait thing that this man was referring to, I don't know if we're actually single trait selecting, but I have said on this podcast many, many times, and I truly believe this, while I can follow Jim Williams anytime he judges, and I think Mr. Williams can follow me.
Yep.
We probably won't line them up exactly the same. We won't be far off, but we won't line them up exactly the same because it's not single trait selection, but maybe a long neck is a bigger priority for that judge that this man is talking about, or maybe depth aside is a bigger priority for some people. It's not that they're single trading selecting for that, but that is what they like to see the most. And so that gets reflected in that judge's placing. So I don't think it's as much single trait selection as there are so many judges out there, as Mr. Williams alluded to, that have different priorities from other people. And we're not all as close to the same page as we used to be because there's just a lot more people out there that are doing it. And so I don't think it's as much single trait selection as different priorities, but I agree with Mr. Williams. I hope there is light at the tunnel where we can, as a group or a judging pool, regardless of species, try to get closer on the same page about a variety of priorities or issues. And the one that I think all three of us on here can say that we need to get closer on first is structure.
Yeah. I agree.
Excellent. The final question comes from Samantha. I have heard rumors that Jimmy Williams was going to be the Cattle Trends episode guest. I would like to know, as a show superintendent, how do we get Jimmy Williams here to judge?
Well, got a call yesterday from Sterling City, Silver City, New Mexico. Man, wanted me to judge. I said, man, it's a long way from Bowling, Texas to New Mexico. How many steers are you going to have? He said, we're going to have about 18. I said, sir, you don't want to get me to come to break the bank, you know. And they said, no, we want to get you. I said, well, we'll see on all that. But I've got my knees fixed now, so Lou Ann's going to give me the final okay, but I'm going to see how I'm going to do. But there's lots of good judges out there. They're just hard to find. But call me and ask me, and I'll see if I can do it. If I can, I will. If I can't, I won't do it. But I won't turn one down. I judged one last week at Fremont, Texas. Lou Ann said, boy, we've come a long way. We started at Laredo, Texas when you were a youngster, judging at the out in the cow field at Laredo. The show sounded good. The Laredo International Livestock Exposition. You judged it in a cow pasture. I was at Fremont judging one this weekend because I got a ranch down there. And she said, we've come far, hadn't we, Dad? I said, we have. Living the dream, you know. But I don't know. I appreciate there's lots of good judges out there, Samantha. But if you want me, I'll be glad to do it if I can. Okay.
And all of Mr. Williams' information can be found on the V8 Facebook. If you want to get him, there's his email, I'm sure his number and all that. So look at that. But that would be the best place to find out how to contact him.
Excellent. I can't tell you, Jimmy, how excited I was to have you on. And I think this is going to be one of the more popular episodes. And Ryan, thank you for reaching out and getting everything lined up. And this was good. And it's greatly, greatly appreciated. Until next week, be safe.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank y'all, gentlemen.